In this video, I'm going to teach you how to build this DIY rip fence for your circular saw for less than $5. Let's get started. On walks, we pick up trash, and on a recent walk, we picked up this piece of trash. It was a small piece of angle iron that fell off of a semi-truck, and I thought, what a wonderful thing to turn into a tool. So I made this small DIY rip fence out of trash, but I'm going to show you how to do it with materials that you can buy easily at the hardware store. So first, what is a rip fence and why would you want one? A lot of circular saws, in fact most circular saws, have a small groove right here, and what it does is it goes across the entire plate. Let me show you how it works. If you look really closely, this slot goes all the way across the plate, and there's a small knob over here that's used to tighten this rod. What this does is it goes across the entire plate and allows you to install a rip fence. When most of us think of a circular saw, we think of cross-cutting. An example would be like this. I've got this timber here and I want to rip it in half. So we would lay our speed square on here as a fence, and we would use our circular saw to make a crosscut. But what happens if you have a large sheet of plywood or some sort of sheet good that you want to rip? And what if you want to rip a bunch of pieces the same length? That could be really time consuming. You might think, that's exactly what I use my table saw for. But have you ever tried to run a sheet of plywood or something like that through a table saw? It's massively cumbersome unless you have some sort of shop setup. And that is where the rip fence comes in. Especially if you're trying to make multiple cuts that are the same dimension. This can be a massive time saver, and it can make your cuts more accurate. This fence gives your saw something to ride against on the edge of your sheet good. And depending on the width of the setting on your saw here, you can make very consistent cuts very quickly. To make this fence, you basically need two pieces. You need this piece of flat bar here, and on some saws it's a little bit wider and others a little more narrow. This is 1/2 inch wide. It's very important. And then the thickness needs to be correct. I'll show you what I found in the hardware store that makes this a no-brainer, so you don't even need to think about it. This one I had to do a bunch of surgery to. And then you're going to need some sort of precise piece of angle to attach to the fence. And lastly, you're just going to need a couple of really good screws that we can use to attach the two together. So what I found at the hardware store is this small piece of flat bar here. And it's actually the perfect dimension. This is an 1/8 inch thick by 1/2 inch wide, and it fits wonderfully right into the slot in the saw. So there's no cutting, no trimming or anything. And I think this bar was around $3 or less. We're not even going to use the whole bar. You could, as you can see, you can make an extremely long fence. Let's say you wanted to cut 2-foot rips. You can make a fence that can cut a full 2 feet with your circular saw. The other thing I found was this Simpson strong tie bracket. This is actually a deck bracket, but it'll work wonderful for a fence. You can see that it's got a nice, beautiful square corner there. It's made of nice galvanized steel, so it's going to be super durable and rigid, and we can just fasten our flat bar to this and make an easy fence. And if we do it right, we're going to end up with something that looks about like that. This bracket was around $4. Quick disclosure. This tutorial is set up to install this fence in the opposite orientation, but as I've been using this tool, I saw a flaw with that design. When the fence is turned around, the minimum ripping distance is actually pretty large. What if you wanted to rip something, say 1.5 inches or 2 inches? You're going to need this fence to come all the way to the plate. So I simply reversed the fence, and now I can take really small rips. Keep that in mind as you watch this video. You know, I think the answer is to have more than one ripping fence. There's definitely a time to have one that's maybe 1 foot long for those really small rips, because this bar gets really floppy toward the end. So I think the answer is to have one long like this when you want to do 18-inch, 2-foot rips, say on plywood. But then to have one that's maybe around 10 to 12 inches long so that you can work in those smaller ripping sections. Depending on if you have more than one saw or not, one thing you're going to want to take into consideration is where does the plate start? Because what you wouldn't want is for your fence to start back here when your plate actually starts up here. You'd really like them to start about the same time. That way your plate is sitting on the sheet good and so is your fence. So we're just going to measure the distance from here back to make sure that we have the right distance on the plate that we're going to cut. So it looks like this one is around 2 and a fat 1/8. So maybe we'll call it 2 1/8, and that's the distance back here that we want to install our flat bar. I kind of teased you with this. I actually found this product in the same section. This is in the metal section. This is just aluminum angle. This was a little bit more expensive at around, I think, $8 or a little bit more for a 3-foot stick of this. But if you cut off just 6 inches, this is probably about $1.50 or so, and you can make the same thing out of aluminum. So it would be super light and very corrosion resistant. And you guessed guessed it, they make aluminum flat bar. It's the exact same dimension. It's an 1/8 by a 1/2 inch. I think this was around $4, maybe a little bit less. The only downside to aluminum is just going to be the amount of flex that's available in the flat bar in this orientation. But if you're cutting a sheet good, this shouldn't really have that much stress on it. It's really this orientation that we don't want to bend like this so that our saw and our cut do not get crooked. All right, and of course we're going to need some screws, but the screw conversation actually needs to happen in the context of the drill bit. So let me show you the drill bit that you're going to use to do this. It's a special drill bit called a drill tap. They usually come in a set, and they have many different sizes. And what they tell you is the size of the screw that will end up going in that hole. A lot of times electricians use these to drill into electrical boxes, things like that. But they're wonderful and durable, and they're designed to work in many different materials. With the steel, you have to be a little more patient. The aluminum, you can be a little bit more rowdy. What you want to be careful of is that you don't break the bit. I'll show you how to tap something so that you don't end up damaging the bit. There are definitely tiers of quality in these tools. I think you can probably get most of these for around $20 or less. But be prepared to spend a little bit of money if you want something that's a little higher quality. I'll say this, if you buy something lower quality, they definitely are evident in the tapping portion, and they're likely to shear off or break, which not only cost you the bit, but sometimes they shear off in the hole, and they can be really annoying to try to extract from the hole. So think about quality if you need to buy some drill taps. Here's a secret if you have a boneyard of screws and you just want to use something that's laying around in your boneyard. What you can do to try to figure out what screw will fit what drill bit. This drill bit shows that it's actually designed for a 6/32 screw. That's actually a very common screw. What you can do is take your drill bit and you can set it up against a screw and just check the threads against the screw to see if they nest carefully. If they nest perfectly, you actually have a perfect match between the drill tap and the screw. If you look carefully, there are actually 3 distinct parts to this bit. The first one is the drill bit part that starts the hole. And then down here we actually have the threading portion, which creates the threads for the screw. And then we have the small bevel or chamfer that actually countersinks the head, which allows the screw to hide. So we want to use all 3 parts of this to drill, thread, and then countersink the screw. All right, so the first question we need to work through is which way do we want the fence? This way or this way? I'm thinking you're probably going to want it this way because you're going to want everybody to know that you're using a Simpson strong tie bracket as a fence. So let's do that. And then it looks like our measurement here for the fence was around 2 1/4 inches. So let's go ahead and make a mark for that. We want to make sure that our flat bar is in the right position, so a small mark there. We can use our framing square here to just give us a nice clean line to work with, like that. And a quick test fit looks pretty good. So I've taken a moment and set up this hold down clamp, and I've got everything aligned right here, so we should be able just to hold our work there. And we could draw a second line here just to give ourselves a nice reference in case things decide to move on us. Right now we're just going to drill the first screw, which at this point is just designed to hold this down. We'll take a moment and true everything up before we put the second screw in. So let's go ahead and drill our first screw. I should take a moment here just to make sure so people understand I would not use a drill tap with an impact driver. There's something that really does need to move kind of slow and precise. The drill bit, not as much, but the tapping and the countersinking for sure, just because the bit is fairly thin. And so if you use it with an impact, the impacting process will probably just shatter the bit. So I would not use this with an impact. I would only use it with a drill. And I would make sure that you're just very gentle. You'll kind of see the motion here. So let's pick a spot here kind of toward the back, and we'll go ahead and start drilling our first hole. Feels like we made it through the bracket, or we're very, very close. What I was feeling there is coming into the threading portion, the tapping portion. So now we kind of want to slow down and let the bit sort of guide us. What I'm looking for is the first initial bite that comes on the tapping portion. And that's when we want to really slow down there, right there, and let the bit do the work. So here I'm going to go in a little bit, and then I'm going to back out. And I'm just taking a little bit of metal each time I do that. Oh, there you go. So I broke it. And that's how fragile these can be. And that didn't take much, I'll tell you. I'm really disappointed. That was pretty pathetic. That really should have been way more durable. And see, now it's stuck in my work. So how do you get that out of there? Very frustrating. Okay, I was able to remove the broken tap from the flat bar just using a pair of pliers. And thankfully, it looks like it actually did go ahead and thread this entire hole. So it looks good on there, and then the flat bar is threaded also. And what I did was I just took a grinder here and just knocked off the tip of this tap so that we could potentially use this continued for the countersinking part. So let's see what'll happen here. Okay, so we're through the threaded part there, and let's just keep going. And now we're into the countersinking part, and we're just taking a little bit out of there so that the screw head will nest. Maybe around there, okay? And let's just see if we can back this out without breaking it. Here, we want to get the threads through there. Perfect. So we're just going to nest. We want to go just below the height of that screw. So we should be able to put the screw through the flat bar and everything now and make it all connect. One trick in this type of situation is to use a self-tapping screw. This screw actually is self-tapping. It's got small serrations here toward the bottom of the head. And so it'll actually make it a little bit more forgiving. If you didn't get the tap perfect, it'll sort of make its own tap. If it's a little hard going in, just work it in and then work it back out. And it'll actually kind of cut its own threads. Where this little guy here does not have the self-tapping portion. And so this type of screw will be just a little less forgiving. Just for giggles, let's see if we can use this less forgiving screw here and make the connection. Well, it's going in really smooth right now. Oh yeah, nice and snug. You can see that the screw is nicely recessed in here, and so as we slide this over our material, it's not going to snag on the screw. So I've got my speed square here, and I've trued up the flat bar to the fence here, and we have our original line. And we're just going to go ahead and clamp the speed square to our fence. That'll help us keep everything in nice alignment while we drill the second screw. We are true to the fence, and we are true to the square. So everything looks really good. Okay, let's go ahead and drill our second screw. All right, I think I'm through the flat bar because I'm seeing a bunch of wiggling in the flat bar. So we're now into the bracket here. We're getting a little bit of wobble on the bracket, which doesn't make me happy, but we're not making machinist work here. So it kind of feels like we're about to go through the end of the sheet metal here. So we're starting to see a little bit of cutting on the threads. So we just need to be careful with that. Boy, we're getting really close to coming through the bottom of that bracket. Okay, happens very quick, which is why I'm kind of taking my time. If you go like a hot dog, you're gonna end up just blowing through these drill taps, which is not good. Okay, that feels like, again, we're trying to tap a little bit. Okay, that was definitely through. So we just lost a little bit, so let's see what happens now. Oh yeah, yep. So let's come out and go in. So that's plenty of torque. Kind of cleared a little bit. Boy, this just wants to go really fast. Boy, I can see why it broke. So part of it's my drill not wanting to be nice. So let's see if maybe I can just go in gentle by hand. Boy, see, it wants to break trying to come out. That's what happened to me the last time, is it actually broke on the way out trying to clear the threads out. Definitely got a lot of bite to it. Let's see what happens here. Okay, whew. Yeah, there's only about 3 or 4 threads in there, and we got to go with like probably 10 threads at least. That kind of yank is what'll break your bit. So let's just be patient here. It'll go. Slowly cutting threads in there. Oof. Oof. So just trying to keep from snapping this bit. You can see why that last one just popped right off. So we're actually all the way through the flat bar already. We're going like maybe 1/8 of a turn at a time. Nope, broke another one. Well guys, sorry, this is supposed to be a fun tutorial, but it's turning into a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? So we're pretty much through. See, this is where we were on the last one. And guess what? Yeah, didn't make it through. Let's just see if we can use a self-tapping screw to clean up these threads really quick and make this work. Don't love it, but maybe it'll be a little bit more forgiving than the drill taps. Oof, that's kind of wanting to go in there crooked. It's not good. There we go. It's going in there pretty straight. Okay, so what we need to do is just gently run that tap back down in there and countersink that screw, and we're good. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And we have the same risk coming out as we did going in, that it's gonna bite and grab. Okay, and then let's just check here. We want to see that screw head just slightly recessed. Yep, perfect. All right, we've come full circle now, and we can go ahead and attach our fence. All right, and let's snug them up tight. Okay, let's do the moment of truth here and see how well we did. And we'll trim those screws off here in just a second. Let's take this and put our fence up against it. Boy, it is very close, probably within a 30-second or less. It's a tiny, tiny bit off out here. And you know, if I was a better machinist and a better DIYer, probably solve that problem. Well, it seems a shame to leave it like this because odds are pretty good that the screws, you know, over time with vibration and things might wiggle loose. I'm going to put in the materials list for this DIY project a couple of lock nuts, but you can use your imagination here. There's a lot of options. You could put a pencil holder right here if that's something that would be convenient for you. I took a little bit of time and just made a couple of my own DIY wing nuts, and I'll show you why. So I just drilled a small hole in the bottom of each of these and tapped them. So now I've got myself my own nut. One of the things I find difficult in operating the fence is moving in and out. You kind of grab onto it, it's just a little bit awkward. So I thought it'd be interesting to see if I could build kind of a little grip here on top using these two. So creating kind of a dual purpose nut. And if I line them up just right like that, now I sort of have a grip where I can pull my fence and make easy adjustments. I have another feature into this nut I'll show you now. So after you're done with your job, you can either go in your trailer or in your workshop with a small hook. Clever. All right, I think it's time for a test fit. Beautiful. We've got ourselves a very nice ripping fence, but I see an opportunity here to improve this a little bit. I can't remember if this is a feature that's on the rip fences that you buy, although I have a hunch that it might be because they tend to think of most everything. But just in case they don't, we can make this a little bit better. My imagination is that we can make some quick engraving marks on this flat bar at common increments. Like, let's say, we're probably not going to rip 1 inch too much, right? So let's maybe say 3, 4, 5, and 6 inches. Those would be pretty common rips that you might do. I'm not sure if it's worth it, but we could do halves in there just to save ourselves a little bit of time. And that way you don't have to use a tape measure. You can just grab your fence, adjust it to the plate, and you can make a quick rip. Let's adjust our fence off the blade to a known measurement in here. Let's see, so let's open this up. And if we can just get one measurement, then we can just measure off the plate itself, or off of the flat bar itself. So there's 6 inches off the blade. So that would be 7, 8, 9, 10, let's do 11. I don't know why you would do 11-inch rip, but you never know. And let's do 12. And let's assume that beyond that, you're gonna have to take your time. Maybe we make a 12 here, and then maybe we make like a 16, 18 or something like that, and a 24 or something. Well, how do you think we did? Did we get really far off and do like reference error? So let's put that right on the 24 mark. And let's pull a tape and see how we did. Oh, she's close. I think we're probably just a sneeze over, maybe around a 16th. So that's the flaw in trying to do this, is that you end up with reference error. Let's see where we're at 18 and see if we made that mistake around 18 here. Let's go right on the nuts there. That's actually spot on. So somehow between 18 and 24 I made a small error there. That one's really good. And then let's pull it in here for the 12-inch cut. Now we're getting down into maybe some of the more common rips that you would do, and see how good we are there. Oh yeah, 12, perfectly 12. All right, it's time to go test it out. All right, I've got my saw set to 12-inch. Obviously, this is a terrible example. This is more like a crosscut. You'd hit it with your speed square and use it as a fence. But if I set up a big long sheet right here, it'd probably be pretty hard to film. So let's just see if we can cut a 12-inch piece with this. Well, it started out as 12, but it ended up a little bit shy. I think I was just kind of wobbling all over the place. So let me give that another try. The only problem is, now that I've made a mistake on that edge, it's probably going to be a pretty bad edge. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm going to flip this over. And that's the problem with having a wonky edge. Why don't we get a little less crazy here, and let's just dial this back to 6 inches. All right, let's see here. So I think that's the edge we cut. Yeah, and there's the factory edge. So let's kind of see how we are up against the factory edge. Well, we're a little shy there by about 1/8, and we're right on the money there. So I think what's happening is, as I get to the end, I think I'm curving in. So I'm not sure if it's the guide causing that or me, but that's my mistake. And honestly, when you're doing rips like that, I mean, you're not going to be using this type of setup for something that's extremely high precision. It's meant to save you a lot of time. I would say that is well within, that's probably within a 32nd, and that's on the fat 16th side, which is probably a little too much if you're used to being a high precision person. Exactly the same, which means I probably cut perfectly straight, because this piece should be a little bit wrong because I cut it wrong. So I'm pretty close. I think if I was using this for ripping sheath goods, I'd probably be pretty happy. I might be able to do a little bit of tweaking and fine tuning and get it to cut really perfect. It's decently straight. Not my best work. Good enough, probably within a 16th. Good enough.